Yee. Welcome to another episode of SCP Thursday with me, Yee Sensei, and our host, Kavzar the Blind. What's going on, brother?
Nothing much, man. Just taking it easy after a long, long day.
I feel it, man. I'm glad it's Thursday. I mean, it sucks to always wait for that weekend, but hey, it's Friday tomorrow, and something magical always feels good about the weekend, even if it's just 2 days. We
Oh
in
yeah,
there.
man. All right, so let's get it started for this evening. And like I hinted at in the previous stream, we're going to start getting into some of the more heavy hitter articles and stuff. So what we're going to be doing tonight is three different videos from the Exploring series. It's a YouTube channel for those of you unfamiliar. Um, And we're basically, the first two videos we're going to be watching are kind of a preface to the third. You don't necessarily need to know the preceding two videos in order to watch the third, but it's pretty handy because, I mean, it makes one of the scenes more epic. But the first video is going to be SCP-001. Now, the Exploring series has done a couple of videos on different 001 proposals. As a matter of fact, one of the first videos we watched on Vicente's channel is SCP-001, A Good Boy, and that was one about the AI that was cleaning up the universe and getting rid of all of anomalies. So that's actually one of my favorites. But this particular 001 video that the Exploring series did, it's kind of an anthology where he covered a bunch of different ones in passing. He didn't go like into specific details. So I'm actually going to be cutting off the first video kind of early because there is one specific 001 proposal that I kind of want to cover before we move on to the next video. And it's pretty brief. It's only like a couple of minutes. So once we're done discussing that one, then we'll move on to the second video, which is the deer. So we're going to watch the first one
Nice.
first. And this SCP-001 proposal is actually one of the originals, if not the original. And this one is called SCP-001, The Gate Guardian.
Nice.
SCP-001. The SCP Foundation contains thousands of anomalous creatures, objects, and phenomena, and this list of SCPs of course starts with number 1. Newcomers to the site will be perhaps surprised to find that there is no single SCP-001, but instead there are currently over 24 proposals outlined for the slot. The reason for this structure within the universe is so that no one outside of the O5 Council know which of the proposals is the true SCP-001 for the sake of security. The reason for this out of the universe is because having the 001 slot was considered special, and it was reserved for something worthy of the slot. The proposals were then first submitted hoping to earn the spot, but at this point it's likely that no single proposal will ever be chosen. While a number of the 001 proposals are related to the concept of the fictional starting of the Foundation, just as many of them have nothing to do with the early Foundation. There are far more proposals than I'd like to fit in one video, and likely many more to come, so this video will go over a number of the most popular proposals. The highest rated proposal was submitted by Dr. Clef, titled The Gate Guardian. This proposal describes a massive humanoid entity, over 1,000 feet in height, that stands motionless at a location near the intersection of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This entity is standing in front of a tremendous gate, through which a pastoral grove can be seen, which include 2 immense fruit trees. The entity is seen with its head bowed, holding a large sword or knife, and with a number of bright wings emerging from its back. Any entity, living or otherwise, that comes within 1 kilometer of SCP-001 is attacked and obliterated instantly. Additionally, any hostile action taken against SCP-001 from any distance results in the destruction of the attacker. However, those that directly observe the entity from a safe distance are given a telepathic order that they are compelled to obey. The most common of these is forget, causing the observer to walk away and forget their experience. Notably, the founder of the Foundation was given the directive, "Prepare," leading him to start the SCP Foundation. The Foundation has done some minor testing with the entity, but nothing so far has passed the 1-kilometer barrier. SCP-073 and 076, known as Cain and Abel, both refused to go near the entity, although Cain was ordered to approach, causing some expunged effect and the termination of any further experimentation. Finally, the proposal ends with a transmission that the Foundation received, time-stamped a number of years in the future, discussing SCP-001 leaving its location and an imminent apocalyptic scenario. The entity currently has no containment procedures, although it is constantly monitored. S. Andrew Swan's proposal.
So yeah, pretty short, sweet, simple, to the point. A lot of the old school quintessential SCPs, that have 3 number designations are pretty simple. And the reason that a lot of people tend to like the older articles is because you can kind of use them for tales and stuff. So, they're not explained for a reason. They're kept kind of deliberately vague, essentially. It's also, noted that, because it's a biblical SCP, that it is related somewhat to Cain and Abel. So, I actually might plan on doing that in my short story at some point. But anyways, so the next video that we have is not an SCP-001 proposal, but this is an entirely different article, and this is the Deer. It's another deific entity in the SCP universe, and it is one of the most popular articles on the site historically.
SCP-2845, the Deer. How do you contain a god? The answer to that question, of course, probably varies depending on the god. For some, the answer might be, you don't. For others, maybe you convince the world to stop believing in them. And for others, maybe you just ask them. There are forces in the SCP universe, however, that won't go politely, and don't care who believes in them or not, but represent a massive threat to the world, and must be contained by the Foundation somehow. One of these entities is SCP-2845, the Deer. SCP-2845 is partially known for having some of the most complicated and esoteric containment procedures in the Foundation, which we'll get to later. But overall, I want to explain 2845 and its connection to mythology. On November 27, 2011, a comet was sighted in space, although it wasn't on a trajectory to impact Earth. A few days later, the existence of the comet was confirmed by multiple observatories, and 2 weeks later, a fragment of the comet broke off, maintaining a constant speed. This fragment was confirmed to have a trajectory that would connect to Earth, and so public announcements and evacuations commenced. 4 days later, the fragment lands in the Pacific Ocean, and over the next 3 days, SCP-2845 crosses 124 kilometers of the ocean to reach the western coast of the United States. On Christmas Day, 2011, civilians began to upload video footage of 2845, and it is confirmed to be hostile. The Foundation joins forces with the Global Occult Coalition to recover and contain the entity, but the following day, artillery bombardment commences. Observation of 2845's capabilities and nature forced the Foundation to bring in outside containment consultants. On December 30th, an unknown event causes the Foundation and GOC to cease their bombardment for 16 hours, during which 2845 is unimpeded. Bombardment recommences, and the entity is led across the Sierra Nevada mountains while under constant artillery strikes. On January 15th, the entity is finally contained using unknown methods, and Site-100 is built around SCP-2845 to properly contain it. 2845 is finally declared properly contained on February 19th, 2012. As you might have inferred from the title, SCP-2845 is an entity with the appearance of a large deer, with a humanoid face and especially large antlers. A ring of ice particles and metal is anomalously suspended behind its skull at all times, constantly rotating. Aside from being seemingly impervious to all physical damage inflicted upon it, 2845's main anomalous trait is its capability of transmuting and reconstructing any matter in sight, instantaneously. No matter is created or destroyed in the process, and the result remains stable even when it normally wouldn't, such as transmuting something into liquid metallic hydrogen at room temperature, or changing the local atmosphere without it mingling with other regions. SCP-2845 is capable of using these transmutations in offensive ways, easily devastating groups of combatants. It has also been observed using its abilities on single targets, up to 10 kilometers away, transforming individuals into anomalous structures. These structures are columns measuring 2.4 meters in height, with rubbery yellow-green skin. Most of the original body is used to fill the column, but the brain encompasses the entire interior structure, and is in a constant state of high activity, possibly communicating with SCP-2845. Some of the individuals transformed by the deer retain mobility, but all have evaded capture so far. So, how do you contain something that is hostile, impervious to harm, and can change anything it wishes into hydrogen gas with simply a thought? Well, the answer is complicated, of course. I'll first go over the lengthy containment protocols before explaining why exactly they work. As mentioned, the Foundation went to outside containment consultants for some reason, which they practically never do, but these consultants are never allowed to leave Site-100 without a heavy dose of amnestics. Dozens of trained personnel and D-Class are assigned to containing 2845, and Site-100 is permitted an unhindered supply of untrained subjects for the purposes of containment, as 2845 is clearly a top priority. The containment chamber itself, along with Site-100 around it, have been constructed to exact specifications in a very specific design. To simplify, the site consists of a number of concentric circles, along with a number of circular chambers, each placed at specific points. The floor of each of these circular chambers contains a 6-pointed star, made of lead, and the central chamber, where 2845 and hundreds of converted humans are located, contains an atmosphere primarily consisting of hydrogen at negative 110 degrees Celsius. The actual containment procedures are when things start to get really strange, though, as they are both numerous and complicated. There are 6 procedures, each lasting 39 minutes, and with 10 hours between each of them. This adds up to 63 hours and 54 minutes, after which the 6 procedures will begin again, repeating endlessly. Each procedure is carried out by 6 individuals, usually trained containment specialists, but some procedures involve D-Class personnel. The first procedure involves 6 trained individuals putting on masks and performing a comedic play that includes trading insults, ending with the one wearing the foolishness mask outwitting the others and declaring himself king. This is followed by a game of dice, although the winner is irrelevant. The second procedure involves a live musical performance, utilizing various instruments, accompanied by singing and dancing. The third has the containment specialists exchanging gifts, each not exceeding $4.28 in value. A recitation is performed while giving each gift, along with a scattering of grain around the containment chamber. The fourth procedure involves the individuals binding their feet with wool while consuming half a liter of olive oil and reciting another ceremony. This is followed by them reciting a separate ceremony while breaking apart a large rock with hammers. For the fifth procedure, a D-Class is brought in, and a symbol is painted on their stomach with a platinum-based solution. They are then presented with a cloak, crown, and scepter, before being restrained in a chair and castrated with a hand sickle. The specialists recite another ceremony while disposing of the testes in a bowl of salt water. The final procedure involves a baby, no more than 3 months old, being roasted over a fire. The specialists recite another ceremony and then consume the infant. They recite another ceremony, consume gastroliths, induce vomiting, and recite the final ceremony. If a containment breach occurs, the on-site nuclear device is to be detonated. All Foundation facilities are to be locked down, and protocol Strike Down the Moon is to be activated. To reiterate, for full clarity, the containment specialists of SCP-2845 cook and consume roughly 135 babies each year, along with castrating the same number of D-Class, just to contain the entity. This is likely where some of you would like me to explain how that's actually not true, and that the containment procedures are simply an elaborate ruse. Unfortunately, that's only partly the case, and the SCP Foundation certainly does carry out these procedures, and will likely continue to do so for the foreseeable future. We're given a letter from a containment consultant to the site director, and it seems that others were confused about the nature of the containment protocols. The consultant is upset that the Foundation is attempting to cut corners where they can't be cut, after all of the effort it took to contain 2845. We're then given his explanation for why the procedures work, and that's because 2845 is a god. He says that it's not a local or mild god, or a weaker spirit bound by the strength of belief, but a powerful god. Gods cannot be contained by technology or scientific rules, but instead by rituals and words. Specifically, he says that rituals work not because of some underlying laws, but because they are given meaning through repetition and application. Basically, there's nothing stopping 2845 from escaping its containment with a thought, but it doesn't ever think to do so, because the continued ritual fools it into believing it's trapped. He claims that it literally cannot comprehend the concept of escape, as long as the ritual continues as it has. Essentially, the containment procedures are not weaving magic or anything so esoteric, but they have some fundamental meaning to 2845 that keeps it trapped. So then, if the containment procedures aren't really doing anything specifically, why doesn't the ritual just consist of something arbitrary, like clapping your hands 30 times, or dancing around a hat, instead of consuming infants? To answer that, we'll have to take a look at some history and mythology. Although some people may look at 2845 as some random anomalous deer, there are clues that point it towards something more familiar: Saturn. Saturn was a god worshipped by the ancient Romans, with his Greek equivalent being Cronus. Saturn was worshipped as a god of agriculture, wealth, liberation, and time. Saturn was celebrated with an annual festival known as Saturnalia, consisting of parties, gift exchanges, and feasting, which would go on to influence traditional Christmas celebrations. Saturn or Cronus were never depicted as deer as far as I know, but deer have been featured in a number of different mythologies and religions, although 2845's appearance seems similar to a Japanese forest spirit, most popularly depicted in the film Princess Mononoke. 2845 has a ring of ice particles and metallic spheres behind his head, just as the planet Saturn, named after the god, has a ring around it composed mostly of ice particles, and has 7 primary moons orbiting it, each named after a sibling of Cronus. Saturn's atmosphere is made up of primarily hydrogen, along with helium and ammonium, just like 2845's main containment chamber. Much of Saturn's structure is made up of liquid metallic hydrogen and liquid metallic helium, the most common transmutations performed by 2845. 2845 landed on Earth on December 21st, a date when Saturnalia would traditionally be celebrated, and many of the containment procedures are also linked to Saturnalia. The first procedure, in which a play is performed by individuals in mask, is based on Roman comedic theater, and the gambling with dice is based on a common activity during Saturnalia. Similarly, the musical performance of the second procedure would have been a common sight during Saturnalia. The third procedure involves the specialists exchanging gifts, but specifically cheap gifts, as this is a common Saturnalia practice, and the scattering of grain is linked to Saturn's role as a god of agriculture. The remaining procedures deal less with Saturnalia and more with mythology, however, and so I will explain the story of the castration of Uranus. Uranus was a very important god in Greek mythology, embodying the sky, and was the son and husband of Gaia, who embodied the earth. Gaia and Uranus had a number of children, one of which was Cronus. Uranus had hated the first children that Gaia bore him, so he had imprisoned them deep within the earth. Gaia greatly resented this act, so she asked her other children to take a sickle and castrate their father. Only Cronus, youngest and most ambitious, was willing to do so, and he ambushed his father and castrated him, tossing the genitals into the sea. It was then foretold that a similar fate would occur to Cronus, and he would be overthrown by one of his own children. Desperate to avoid this, Cronus devoured each of his children as they were born. His sixth child, however, Zeus, was born in secret, and his wife tricked Cronus by presenting him with a large stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, rather than Zeus. Cronus ate the stone, but Zeus later forced him to vomit it back up, along with the other children, and he placed the stone at a sacred site, where it was regularly anointed with oil and strands of wool. To connect the myth with the containment procedures then, the fourth procedure involves the specialists binding their feet with wool and consuming olive oil, which has a pretty clear connection to the stone that Cronus ate, but also connects to the statue of Saturn in the temple in Rome, which was filled with oil, and normally had its legs bound with wool, which was removed during Saturnalia. The fifth procedure involves painting a symbol on a D-class, the symbol of Uranus, and castrating him, just as Uranus was castrated. The testes are placed in a bowl of salt water to symbolize Cronus' tossing of his father's genitals into the sea. Finally, the roasting and consumption of the child is based on Cronus eating his own children, along with vomiting afterwards. These containment procedures aren't really random, as each has been specifically crafted in connection with 2845's connection to Saturn. Whether it actually is Saturn, or is some embodiment of the myth and the planet is unknown, but the ritual works. The containment consultant that designed the procedures knew what he was doing, and perhaps even more impressive was how quickly he was able to design a procedure that would contain such an entity, based on very little information. The text that displays after you click on his letter reads, "Towering Kadath, my home." Kadath is a location created by author H.P. Lovecraft, which is located in the Dreamlands of Earth. I've done an entire video on the Dreamlands in the Cthulhu mythos if you're interested, but Kadath was once the home of the dream gods of Earth, known as the Great Ones. This connection potentially shows the consultant to be involved in far more than just mythology. So, I've now explained SCP-2845, but there are still some unanswered questions, such as, is 2845 actually Saturn? What does it want with our planet? And what are the ramifications of the Foundation's very public containment efforts? Some SCP articles connect and blend with real-world mythology and stories in very blatant ways, while others do so in a much more subtle way, such as 2845. Both can be very interesting, but ones like SCP-2845 benefit from looking beyond just what the entry itself says. In the end, the answer to the question of how do you contain a god is, well, complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah, that was dope. Yeah, that's some fun lore. What was the SCP on this one? What number is this?
SCP-2845, the deer. So it's one of the, well, not originals, but pretty close to it. Anything from 3000 or below I consider to be classic SCPs, which, trust me, those are my favorites. So far we've covered the Gate Guardian. That's one gigantic creature. Then we got the deer, which is a second gigantic creature. Now we have the third video, which will showcase a third one that will take center stage. And this one is the one I've been leading up to, if you sent that. I've wanted to show you this one for a long time. This is actually the video and article that got me hooked on SCP as a whole. This article is called What Happened to Site-13, and it is an epic tale written by none other than DJ Cactus. He's one of the most popular authors on the SCP Wiki.
DJ Cactus. I like it.
Yeah. So, let me play this real quick.
SCP-1730. What happened to Site-13? For the greater good is a phrase that has been used in various forms throughout history to justify certain actions that would normally be considered abhorrent. The SCP Foundation in general, of course, operates largely on this principle throughout most of their work, but often is the case where the Foundation is ultimately correct in their choice of actions. SCP-1730 is a grand, detailed report of a situation where the Foundation was profoundly, terribly wrong. SCP-1730 is easily among the lengthiest articles on the SCP Wiki, and although the actual description of the SCP is fairly short, the numerous logs, recovered materials, and interviews make this an epic report. In this video, I'll attempt to summarize and explain 1730 as best as I can, but keep in mind that I'll be cutting out quite a bit of atmospheric details along the way. SCP-1730 ultimately both asks and answers the question of what exactly happened to Site-13, and we see immediately that 1730 is listed as neutralized, meaning that it's either been destroyed, its anomalous properties have been removed, or it is no longer a part of our existence. 1730 itself is a large complex of structures, with identifying markers showing that it was known as the SCP Foundation's Site-13. Foundation records, however, show that Site-13 was originally planned to be built, but the plans were scrapped. The site was going to be built in Alaska, which seems to be where 1730 is from, which makes it stranger that it is located in Texas. The site seems long abandoned, is in a severe state of disrepair, and there are a number of fuel leaks and fires throughout the facility due to the power generator continuing to operate in a damaged state. Despite this, there is believed to be human survivors somewhere in the lower parts of the facility, as messages have been found on walls throughout the site, including the words danger, bleed, and the phrase, what happened to Site-13? The Foundation has established a simple containment procedure due to the site's remote location, but ultimately they decided to send in some teams to properly explore it. Our first piece of major info comes from a recovered log from a recovery team working for Site-13. They were apparently sent to retrieve and recontain an anomaly, and the log describes the anomaly crawling into one of the team's mouths, causing blood to leak from every orifice. Afterwards, two anomalies come out of the body, with one drinking up all the blood, and the other going back into the dead body, reanimating it. The remainder of the team puts down their reanimated squad mate, but the writer of the log admits that they don't have much longer, says something that was expunged from the record, and states it's just a matter of time before it starts. Interestingly, the expunged section was removed because it was marked as a cognitohazard, something that is dangerous for some reason to an individual when recorded with any of the 5 senses, in this case, likely sight. The log describes the team using C4 explosives to blow up the wall, rendering something illegible, likely the cognitohazard, but says it doesn't matter because Jones already went quiet like the others, and they shoved him down an elevator shaft. Finally, it mentions how someone started up the thresher, which we'll learn about later. The next piece of info is an automated message describing the states of the various systems of Site-13. We see that it was sent minutes before an electrical disturbance and an explosion in the power relay, and shows that nearly every system is offline or compromised, including the Keter-class containment systems. Additionally, the Euclid-class containment systems and the reactor are both in critical status. Finally, we're brought into the present, with the exploration log transcript for the first team sent into Site-13 by the Foundation. The team is the D-12 Mobile Task Force, known as the Mudslingers, and consists of 6 members, including the captain. They enter through the unlocked front doors, switch on their lights due to the darkness, and immediately find messages written on the walls, including the ominous phrase, "Don't look at the walls." They find a service elevator that's still powered, and descend to the 3rd basement level. The team splits up to search the floor, finding that the rooms are filthy, due to being covered in some sort of metallic-smelling sludge. They see a makeshift barricade next to a door, and they also find a few bodies, half submerged in the sludge. A snake-like creature emerged from one of the bodies' mouths, which they immediately terminated, and discovered that the bodies were in fact hollow. The team agrees to return to the elevator, only to find the layout of the floor has changed, meaning they are either hallucinating or the building is physically changing. They head down a hallway which seems to be much longer than the building schematics show, and break down a door into an office. They find a naked human, with fire seemingly burning out of its ears. An intense white light, the sound of searing meat, and static from the team's microphones is all Site Command receives for over a minute, until they also hear the sound of slithering, a cry, and choking sounds. Other strange sounds come through the microphone until the other 2 members who had split away from the group finally respond. They are currently waiting near the elevator and thought their radios had stopped working, until suddenly their camera feeds show them in a different room, with one of them hanging upside down, facing each other, and both are completely stark white. Blood from their mouth, nostrils, and eyes cover their faces, and a large object moves in the background, accompanied by the sound of slithering from multiple directions. One of the team members opens their eyes, and the video and audio feeds cut out. This was the last Site Command heard from the Mudslingers. Clearly, exploration of the main structure was going to prove to be quite dangerous, so until the Foundation could set up a more prepared second attempt, they decided to send in a small team to the power station to assess the damage. MTF Y-24, known as Gulliver's Travelers, is a 3-man team who went to the power station, only to discover the first set of doors inside to be locked and bulletproof. Rather than using explosives, which would risk a collapse, Site Command tries to find someone who would possibly know the clearance code for the door. Despite this site never actually being constructed in this reality, Director Jameson's clearance code from when this site would have been built manages to get the team in. The team examines the power cores, and then releases a micro-drone to provide a closer look, revealing that 7 of the 12 cores are damaged beyond repair, 3 are not functioning at full power, and 2 are, although one of those is currently superheated. The team finds more of the sludge that the other team encountered, and then sees 10 stark white bodies bound to the superheated core with wire. Underneath them, seemingly written in blood, are the words, "What happened to Site-13?" The team descends a stairwell, finding a door at the bottom that has been pried open, and discover a disgusting smell before their camera feeds begin to distort. The audio feed then cuts out completely, and Site Command only receives intermittent communications for 15 minutes, during which the team seems to be encountering more of the dead humans covered in sludge. Finally, it seems as if they encounter one that appears to be alive, before Site Command totally loses contact with the team. The recovered sludge from the microdrone appears to be blood and power core residue mixed with an unknown biological matter. 1 week later, the team's video feed comes back online for 13 seconds, during which it shows a number of humans standing and looking down at a table. The Foundation still needed more time to prepare for the next exploration team, and so decided to send in an unmanned drone to hopefully investigate the lower floors of the main complex. The drone was launched through the same door that the first team entered, and began to descend in the elevator towards the lowest basement floor. After descending 7 floors, a power failure causes the elevator to stop, and so the drone forces the doors open, and descends manually to the 8th basement floor, a Euclid containment wing. After inspecting a number of rooms, the drone sees a vaguely humanoid entity standing near the end of the hallway. The drone follows the entity, as it doesn't seem to notice it, and watches as it picks up some of the sludge on the floor and marks a nearby wall. The symbols on the wall are later revealed to be cognitohazards, which the drone takes pictures of, and continues to follow the entity, which curiously leaves behind no footprints in the sludge. The drone enters the actual containment area, finding a cell containing a human form covered in sludge, with sparks emanating from its fingertips. A sign on the doorway states that Entity 324 is scheduled for termination in December of 1975. The drone finds another cell that had been locked shut. After forcing it open, the drone sees a dead female on the floor, with no sludge in the room. An identification badge on the corpse contains the name Jack Bright. Dr. Bright is a notable individual in the SCP universe, capable of immortality through jumping into different bodies, due to the use of SCP-963. The drone descends to the next floor, finding a working computer terminal, which is running an older version of the SCP Foundation operating system. The drone begins to transmit what files it can access back to Command, but soon they lose contact with the drone. It's at this point that the cognitohazard that Site Command had viewed earlier triggered, causing affected individuals to go silent and begin to burn from their ears. Any audible sound after this would trigger a silent explosion, shaking Site Command and destroying most of their communication equipment. The drone finished transmitting files, but the drone itself was never recovered. I'll skip ahead for a moment to discuss the various files that the drone transmitted back. First, a correspondence from an engineer to the site's chief biologist and assistant director of anomalous biology, Dr. Hadley. Hadley was apparently working with the mysterious Thresher device, and the engineer informed her that although the reactors could surge to power the device, the reactors would likely not survive the process. The engineer goes on to say that the Thresher device is still wildly unstable, and utilization of it would likely destabilize local reality. Another correspondence from an individual who is both on the SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee and the head of the Global Occult Coalition's Ethics Board tells Dr. Hadley that she is not permitted to transfer out of Site-13. Additionally, Dr. Hadley seems to have an issue with Site-13's director and the protocol of terminating humanoid SCPs. The individual informs her that these anomalies are not considered human beings, and are not entitled to any of the rights that human beings are. Next, a test log shows a number of reality benders being exposed to dangerous conditions while wearing inhibitor devices, to see if they can change reality to save themselves. Exposure to extremely cold and hot temperatures, as well as electricity, caused the reality benders to die without them stopping it, while water submersion seems to interfere with the inhibitor device, causing unknown results. As a side note, the administrator of the test is listed as a doctor with only a number identification, not a name, in contrast to how the SCP Foundation usually does things. A message from one engineer to another discusses a buildup of toxic waste in the pit beneath the reactors. The waste is supposed to be piped off-site, but keeps getting built up, which will likely lead to a very serious issue. A note from Director Emerson states that the entire humanoid wing of the facility is to be promptly terminated by electrocution and incineration. It's this process that is seemingly causing the buildup of waste. Another message from an engineer to Dr. Hadley says that he altered termination records for a leech boy that was taken down to the pit. Since the output of the pit is still blocked up, he won't go anywhere. Finally, we get a message from Dr. Hadley to Director Emerson, in which we get a number of new details. The message discusses a containment breach caused by Dr. Hadley, and mentions that Emerson was foolish for thinking that killing the anomalous entities would stop them, as them being living is the least anomalous thing about them. Dr. Hadley goes on to discuss a young boy named Elijah, who subsisted only on blood and could drink it through someone's skin, much like a leech. He had the mental capacity of a toddler, and did not choose to be this way, but Emerson had him incinerated like the rest. Of course, the incineration didn't actually kill Elijah, and him interacting with the bloody sludge caused a highly anomalous process to occur, in which the dead SCPs returned, in a way. In addition to this, of course, the Thresher device was eventually activated, causing the local reality of the site to heavily distort, leading to one highly anomalous facility. The Foundation still needed a more complete understanding of the facility, however, and so another team was sent in to explore its depths. This team, MTF-Z9, called Mole Rats, were specifically experienced in exploring anomalous locations, so they would be best prepared for the reality warping effects inside.
My boys.
The 5-man team entered the main structure, equipped with helmets that would filter out any of the writing on the walls to avoid cognito hazards. They descend the stairs to the 6th basement level and begin to explore the floor, walking past sludge and bodies, when suddenly the floor collapses underneath one of the team members, Z9-4. The fall injures his leg, leaving him immobile, and the rest of the team look for a stairwell to descend. The injured member begins to hear slithering sounds around him, unable to see his surroundings. Gunshots ring out through the facility as one of the members, Z9-3, watching his injured teammate, sees a leech-like creature approaching him. The creature enters Z9-4's mouth and begins sliding down his throat. Z9-3 attempts to shoot the creature, but misses, and asks the captain for permission to shoot Z9-4 to put him out of his misery. He gets no response from the captain, but after Z9-4 lets out a choking plea, he fires his weapon. The floor further collapses, causing Z9-3 to fall and get crushed by debris. 5 minutes later, Z9-4 goes silent. A leech creature comes out of his mouth, and he stands up, picking up his dead teammate's weapon. Site Command received no communication from any of the mole rats for the following 3 hours, when suddenly communication from the 3 team members resumes, with them seemingly below the 15th floor. Z9-4's camera feed comes back for a moment, showing a number of humans with flames coming out of their ears, and a massive pit with a large creature in it covered in smaller creatures. Communication from the rest of the team eventually goes out again for 4 hours, before feeds from the captain resume again. She apparently reached the Thresher device by herself, but she hears footsteps coming towards her. Her light goes out. She begins running through the darkness, and finally communication is lost once again. In the aftermath of this, it was clearly just too dangerous for a team to explore the facility, and so that would have likely been the end of the Foundation's research on 1730. However, one morning, monitoring equipment picked up a looped transmission coming from the facility. The transmission was from a doctor who worked at Site-13, who claimed that there were 12 people still alive in the facility, surrounded by hostiles and running out of supplies. Since the doctor claimed that the transmission would stop looping once he was dead, it seems that for the time being, there were living humans still in there. In light of this, the Foundation cleared a rescue mission. This is when things get really interesting. Another 5-man team was sent in to continue exploring the facility, and hopefully locate the survivors using the coordinates transmitted by the doctor. The team, MTF Apollo-3, Game Wardens, entered the main structure and went straight to the stairwell, hoping to use it to descend to the bottom floor. After traveling down it for nearly 10 minutes, the team finds that the bottom of the staircase is missing, abruptly cutting off into some sort of liquid void. Site Command informs them they are actually about 15 meters below where they thought the stairwell ended. The liquid begins to rise, forcing the team to ascend the stairs, although one of the team members gets his legs enveloped by the void. After pulling him out and up to the next floor, they find that his legs have been cleanly severed at the knees, but he can still feel them as if they were there, and most anomalously, he can actually stand. They pass their hands underneath him, and he appears to be simply floating, without feeling any different than normal. The team explores the floor, finding a rotting corpse they seem to recognize as their friend Zachary, unaware that it is dead. This is seemingly SCP-1500, and its anomalous effects are going through the team's visors designed to filter out cognitohazards. The team continues to chat with the corpse until Site Command finally updates their visors, and they realize that it's just a body. They soon encounter a shimmering humanoid entity approaching them, warping the environment around it. One of the team members is apparently caught in its field of effect, hanging and twisting behind it. The team fires on the entity, but the bullets simply spin around it. The entity proceeds to attack one of the members with an appendage, but they deploy a miniature reality anchor, causing the entity to disperse. They find the member that was caught in its field and is now partially fused with the wall, ceiling, and floor, presumably dead. The team decides to continue on, as it seems just as risky to attempt to leave, and they eventually enter a communications room. A screen flickers on, revealing a standard containment cell containing a single figure. One of the team members recognizes the figure as SCP-993, Bobble the Clown. They begin conversing with the figure, who claims that it is not Bobble, but a thing that used to be Bobble. The figure claims that Director Emerson played with the strings of the universe and broke them. It goes on to say that every anomalous thing that the Foundation could find and the Coalition could catch were brought to Site-13 in order to be fed to the meat grinder, unless there was something to gain first. The figure seems to be heavily disfigured and distorted, and possesses an extreme animosity for Director Emerson, but the team moves on. Site Command loses contact with the team for 30 minutes, during which they manage to find the survivors, who number somewhere in the 20s, and include a few of the mole rats and one of the Gulliver's travelers. The team reveals that they have been down there now for 3 days, not 30 minutes, and are surrounded by anomalous entities with little chance of survival, let alone completing the rescue attempt. Enter Mobile Task Force Tau-5, known as Samsara. Samsara have a bit of their own history, but to summarize, they are essentially cloned cyborgs made from a dead god. They possess regenerative abilities, a number of technological augmentations, and their memories can be loaded onto a clone of their bodies, making them functionally immortal. They are not omnipotent, however, and this rescue mission still has a high chance of failure, but Samsara stood the best chance of succeeding. The Samsara team consists of 4 individuals, and they were outfitted with arm-mounted incendiary cannons, shock-absorbing leg extensions, heat-resistant plating, and built-in filters for their eyes, among other enhancements. The team enters through a drainage pipe and soon split up, with 2 of them continuing down the pipe towards a heat source, and the other 2 breaking through a thin wall into a room containing offices. They find a control room for the incinerator, and are soon joined by the other 2 team members, who remark that the pipe is completely blocked. They activate the machinery, which begins to spin, and the heat continues to rise as the incinerator kicks on. They notice a gate at the bottom, and shoot out the window of the control room, jumping down. They follow another drainage pipe into a cistern, where they find a number of cracks in the walls. Small leeches begin pouring out of the cracks, feeding on the sludge and growing larger. One of the team members realizes there is something huge beneath them, functioning as a host for the leeches. Believing the leeches to be telepathic, they hijack one of the leeches' brains, using it to create a map of the facility, albeit a distorted one due to the continually changing layout. They deduce where the survivors are and decide to take the fastest path towards them, despite the path going through an area where the leeches act considerably quieter than they normally do. The team climbs out of the cistern before going to the nearby stairwell, which is largely destroyed. They drop down, using their leg implants to avoid grave injury, and enter into a server room. The room is cooled to negative 20 degrees Celsius, thanks to a cryonics chamber located directly above, and they soon realize that no sound whatsoever is audible in here. Their filters for cognitohazards begin triggering, and they slowly move through the server room. They see a massive entity moving through the room, a humanoid construct with 6 legs, 18 arms, 36 forearms, and 72 hands. Each limb independently performs constant gestures, believed to be responsible for the silence permeating the room, and where its head would be is instead an emaciated, charred human figure bound to its chest. This figure is struggling against its restraints and continually screaming, although the screaming seems to only be heard as a constant whining sound. The human has the word Emerson seared into its flesh, seemingly by a melted piece of fabric. The entity seems to be hazardous to look at, so the team quickly moves on. The whining sound grows suddenly louder and closer, so the team detonate a proximity mine behind them and rush through a door, dodging white-hot glyphs that begin to appear in the air around them. One of the team members loses an arm in the process, but they quickly flee from the server room, and sound resumes. They soon find the survivors, with one of the mole rats referring to Samsara as the Power Rangers. The leeches begin to come out of nearby cracks in the walls, and the mission changes now from search to rescue. The extraction process begins, with 11 MTF members and 27 staff members of Site-13, a number of which were significantly injured. Their plan involves going to the Thresher device and reducing the power to the machine long enough to produce a stable route to the surface. Destroying the device would likely only cause drastic problems, including their deaths. The group begins moving, with Samsara leading the extraction, and they start to kill what leeches they can. They are soon attacked by the floating humanoid entity seen by the drone that was drawing on the walls, but copious amounts of bullets and incendiary rounds put it down. Immediately after, the floor beneath the entity collapses, revealing a long, slick creature covered in eyes and possessing a mouth full of pointy teeth. It devours the corpse of the humanoid, and a large number of leeches are propelled towards the group. 2 of the Samsara members provide covering fire, as the rest of the group retreats to take a different route. The group enters a hallway where they encounter a cloud of crystal butterflies, SCP-553. The Samsara captain takes on the butterflies himself with his flamethrower, shredding and scorching most of his flesh in the process. They soon encounter a locked door to the Thresher Wing, which they cannot open, but somehow the door unlocks and the figure that was once Bobble the Clown appears on a monitor, laughing, seemingly responsible. They move into the room, finding the Thresher device, although it is surrounded by hundreds of small flying creatures. While deciding what to do, a nearby wall collapses and the many-eyed creature enters. The small creatures descend to attack the large entity, which begins devouring them using long tentacles. While manipulating the Thresher device, a section of the floor collapses, with another long tentacled entity coming through it. The MTF members begin battling the entities, with one of them dying in the process while the device is manipulated. Finally, they force the entities to flee, killing off the rest of the small creatures. The entire facility begins rumbling and shaking, with loud screeching noises accompanying the mechanical sounds. It's time for the team to make their final ascent out of the facility now that the Thresher device is running on low power, and local reality is stabilized. Hoping to meet up with the other two Samsara members on the way, they begin moving, and soon run into SCP-2316, a powerful cognitohazard that takes the form of bodies in the water that people believe they recognize. Samsara keeps the group moving, and they enter into a large garage, where they encounter a massive mechanical construct, seemingly controlled by SCP-1370, who attempts to intimidate the group by claiming to be the Herald of Destruction. A Samsara member easily destroys the small robot controlling the construct, and they meet up with the other two members. They hear a large crashing sound below them, and the floor begins to buckle, so the group flees, losing a researcher in the process. At the bottom of the massive hole is a tremendous black mass, completely covered in red eyes, with several other large black masses extending from it. Presumably, this is Elijah, the Leech Boy. The group flee, chased through the facility by black tendrils coming from the hole, and they find themselves trapped with no way to ascend. One of the mole rats decides to lead them further down into the facility, into a massive containment chamber. The civilians are sent to the far end of the chamber, where an access point will lead them up to the power station and out of the facility. Meanwhile, the MTFs are going to cover them as a huge wall breaks down, and the 200-meter-tall Leech Boy enters the room. A naked human woman is visibly joined to its tongue, and it lets out a piercing scream as the MTFs unleash everything they have on it. A few of the members, however, begin working on opening two massive containment doors, which finally open, unleashing two of the most powerful entities known to the Foundation. One of them is SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, a tremendous winged figure carrying a huge sword, and the other is SCP-2845, an entity largely resembling a deer with a ring of ice and metal rotating behind its head. The Gate Guardian is capable of obliterating anything around it with its fiery sword, and the deer is capable of instantly transmuting and reconstructing matter, making them each quite formidable foes. The three entities begin an unimaginable battle with each other as the MTFs flee towards the civilians. The stairway upwards is damaged by metallic cylinders that come crashing through, killing the Samsara captain. The leader of the mole rats decides to stay behind to buy the group more time, and she's joined by one of the Samsara members as the rest of the group makes it to the surface. The two MTF members that stay behind go back to the Thresher device, turning it to full power as the mole rat captain laughs hysterically and wildly fires her weapon at the Leech Boy. The people above ground hear a deafening, crackling sound. The area around the facility begins to distort, and suddenly, Site-13 is gone, leaving behind an immense crater. No further transmissions are received, and SCP-1730 is marked as neutralized. All that remains is the debriefing then. One of the Game Warden members seems severely traumatized, but the captain of Samsara considers the mission a success, although he seems mournful of the mole rat leader's demise. The Game Warden member, who seemingly lost their legs but can still stand, remarks that it doesn't feel like a phantom pain, as he can actually feel his legs, and occasionally feels something wet and furry brushing past them. The interview with the Samsara member that went with the mole rat captain reveals that they went to a server room and disabled their cameras, because they were apparently given a vision, which they believed to be a cognitohazard. They were standing on a precipice overlooking a vast area, where countless humans screamed, each of them missing their hands, while the sky above them burned. A falling star scorched billions of corpses, and in the middle of the star was the many-armed entity they encountered earlier. They were given visions of coils of fire and storms of souls, a hole at the center of the universe, and a god of nightmares. The Samsara member looked away, but the mole rat captain kept watching, and afterwards went to the thresher device and activated it, saying that she needed to bury the things she saw in darkness, while laughing and crying. Finally, we are given an interview with Dr. Scott, the Assistant Director of Temporal Studies at Site-13, who gives a history of the site as well as the alternate timeline from his reality. Plans for Site-13 began after the Foundation recovered the body of a massive dead sea creature that they could not contain, and so Site-13 was built in a remote location in Alaska and was larger than any facility at the time. After a terrorist used an anomaly to cause an explosion resulting in thousands of deaths, the US government cut all of their funding to the Foundation. A former staff member of President Dole, named Paul Manafort, was appointed Secretary General of the Global Occult Coalition and organized a partnership with the Foundation. The GOC eventually gained control of the Foundation, and they once again received funding from the US as well as the United Nations. Site-13 was the premier containment facility for the Foundation, and was continually being expanded. Emerson eventually became the site director, and began doing terrible things, supposedly under orders from Manafort. The incinerator was built, originally just to dispose of the body of the massive sea creature, but they began using it for everything, as well as doing invasive testing on anomalous creatures and humanoids. Vivisections began, and although the Ethics Committee tried to step in, their chairman was dragged out and shot for being a traitor. The phrase, "for the greater good," was thrown around, and Scott claims that they eventually contained the Abrahamic God, possibly alluding to SCP-343, although he's not sure how they managed it. Dr. Hadley opposed Emerson's orders, and so she was brutally beaten by some guards one night, damaging her mind and leading her to cause the containment breach. Emerson came to Scott and asked him to turn on the highly experimental thresher device in order to stop this, but Scott refused and fled, gathering his team. Before they could leave the facility, however, the device was activated, warping reality. Scott counts himself as lucky for surviving at all, but believes that they could have been floating between dimensions for 1,000 years for all he knows. Now that the device has been reactivated, it's completely unknown when and where it will end up. Like I said, SCP-1730 is one of the longest articles on the entire SCP Wiki, but that alone does not make it memorable. It's memorable because it presents a fascinating tale of the Foundation going simply too far, largely as a result of the influence from the Global Occult Coalition, an organization focused on terminating anomalous items. There are plenty of real-world analogies from groups and organizations that have committed atrocities in the name of research, such as Unit 731, and so it's not far-fetched to believe that the same thing could happen in an anomalous universe. The author, DJ Cactus, took a relatively familiar and overdone concept, a strange, shifting location, and made it something utterly unique by incorporating a compelling backstory, numerous other SCPs, and a highly engaging rescue mission starring the Samsara team. As I mentioned, I cut out a lot of details and practically all of the dialogue, so I absolutely suggest going through this one on your own to get the full experience of what happened to Site-13.
Ooh, that shit right there, that was good.
So yeah, basically to do a better recap, because it was kind of, I don't know, a jigsaw puzzle of a video. And again, this is one of the Exploring series' earlier videos, so he wasn't quite, into the swing of things when it comes to, video editing and writing and so forth. So what happened was, in an alternate reality, the Foundation was essentially gutted by the United States government, and the GOC took over, and the organizations merged, essentially, the GOC and the Foundation, with the GOC being in the driver's seat, essentially. And therefore their doctrine, which is to destroy all anomalies rather than contain them, became paramount over the Foundation's containment policies. It's kind of funny that it mentions Paul Manafort, which, if you remember him from the first regime. But anyways,
I do.
so yeah, so what happens is, they construct Site-13, and it's basically a gigantic meat grinder for anomalies. And what happens is there is a kindly doctor there that took pity on Elijah the Leech Boy, and he was trying to get him out, smuggle him out of the site, but something went wrong and she got caught, and they killed the Leech Boy and threw his corpse into the meat grinder. And what happened was his remains started absorbing all of the other anomalous viscera, whatever you want to call it, in the bottom of the meat grinder from all the other anomalies, and basically turned into a gigantic leech god. And that's what started the containment breach at Site-13 in this alternate reality. So when that happened, Emerson, who was the dickhead in charge of that site, turned on the Thresher device, which is basically a safeguard to, if anything happened at the site and there was a massive containment breach, what would happen is the Thresher device would teleport the entire site out of the reality that it originated from, and it would be some other reality's problem, essentially. That was the giant safeguard, was to basically throw all of these anomalies into some other guy's backyard, essentially. So when Site-13 showed up in the mainline reality, the one we're used to, the Thresher device was both underpowered and damaged when it arrived, so that's why the shifting layout of the building was happening, because it couldn't, formulate the site properly, so it was a bunch of shifting rooms all the time. What else? Oh, so the the being that had Emerson tied to its faceplate, essentially, the one with all those arms and legs, that
Yeah.
actually has a name in the universe, but Tess doesn't say it in this video. But if you read the article, it's mentioned by name in the article, and it's a being called the Maladramagwian, and it's basically this apocalyptic god that rains hellfire and all this other shit. So yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of it. It was a bunch of anomalies that got loose, and it was this nightmarish, hellish scenario. Basically, my favorite SCP in all of this is Bobble the Clown. If you read that part where they come across him in the article, it is hilarious. The dialogue is freaking hilarious and also really unnerving. So, like Tess, I'm going to recommend to you and all of the viewers out there watching this that you read the article for SCP-1730, What Happened to Site-13, because it is one of the best pieces of fiction I've read in years, and that's coming from someone who's not particularly fond of the guy who wrote it. So, yeah, definitely worth the read, and I am very grateful for you to be able to showcase this, Vicente, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was dope, man. It was, the whole story was captivating, and listening to it, I mean, it was, making me nervous for the teams. I was like, this is a fucked up one. I was like, these guys are gonna all didn't die.
Yeah,
A lot
actually,
of
that
innocent
reminds me.
souls.
So the initial part of this, because he kind of glossed over it too, the first exploration log that he talks about, it was actually like a security team from the site, from the original reality that was recovered, and eventually it's part of the file now, essentially. So, but all the other exploration logs are from MTFs that are from the mainline reality that went into the buildings and were exploring it. So yeah, Samsara. This is the article that introduced me to Samsara. This is actually not the last time you will be seeing them because there are other videos in which they appear. And we'll get to those epic ones later on, hopefully next week or the weeks after.
Yeah, it's crazy. I like the crossovers. I think that's what's cool about this universe is I guess you can have one SCP that involves a shitload of SCPs. It's pretty interesting. It's dope.
Yeah, I definitely, the centerpiece is that one piece of art, that showcases all three of those, gigantic deific SCPs, the Gate Guardian, the Deer, and then of course Elijah. It's just this gigantic monster fight that when you read that section of the article and how they describe it, it's insane. You can picture, it's like this gigantic kaiju fight underground that you can just picture it in your mind. It's great writing.
I bet. Yeah, I mean, he does a good job summarizing it, but I mean, if there's dialogue and all that, then it sounds like a full-length movie. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
look, but yeah.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
like you
sounds good,
said,
brother.
he cuts out a lot of the atmospheric details of the summarization that he does. So it was a good introduction to it. So like I said, definitely read it. There's also other content creators on YouTube that have done videos about what happened to Site 13. There's actually, I'm looking at a thumbnail right now from a channel called Mr. Illustrated, and he has a almost 3-hour animated video that he did of what
Sheesh.
happened to Site 13, complete with sound effects, voice acting, you name it. They basically turned the article into a rudimentary film, which is just great. So
I mean, it's crazy what we can do nowadays with technology and how fast you can do it without a Hollywood budget. So that's dope. We'll have to check that out then. But yeah, is that it for our viewing party today then, or do we got anything
yes,
else
sir.
before we
Just
wrap it up?
those three videos: the Gate Guardian, SCP-001, SCP-2845, the Deer, and of course the great epic What Happened to Site-13, SCP-1730, written by DJ Cactus. So for all of you out there, definitely check out the articles. Hope you enjoyed watching. Next week we're going to be doing a two-parter, so there's going to be two videos. They're not strictly related to one another per se, but they're tangentially related to one another. So it'll be great videos next week, and I'm also going to continue to compile the playlist as we go along. So I think we have another 2 weeks set up. So I'm going to actually compile this after this video wraps up.
Very nice. Well, shit, guys. Yeah, I think it's getting good, and we had a lot of doom scrollers in here. Welcome into the end of the stream. I don't know how to say your name. Is it Loino? But welcome in, Jamie. We are wrapping up, guys. So if you're just tuning in, you can watch the recap. It was a really good show this Thursday, and there'll be a good one next Thursday. We are going to take off the Thursday after. I don't know what that is, March 13th, I think. I'll be in LA. My brother's coming down to go to Disneyland, so we'll be doing that. But other than that, we'll be doing every Thursday, unless something else comes up as well. But we'll see you guys next Thursday. And thanks again, Kavzar, for a good stream, good videos, and curating that for us. And yeah, brother, we'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, guys. Good night, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next stream. I think Joe might want to play some Fortnite next, so we might stream again. But this wraps up SCP